How's it going, friends? Welcome to another episode of this solo podcast, meditation process that I'm working myself through. Today, I'm going to kind of reflect on a video day that I had where we went and interviewed our first client for this new brand, and we really tried to, we did. We made our first video. It's in editing, so I have no idea how it turned out yet, but I want to talk through what that was like, and specifically I want to talk through the questions that I asked her, and generally speaking how the process went. Some of these things are good reminders for me. It was a full day of video, and learned a lot in the day, and about how focused I have to be, and maybe how planned I should be ahead of time. And there's maybe some questions that I have about that too. Should I be as planned as I was? I think most of the time, yes, especially if these are agreed upon, meetings. If I just happen to run into somebody during a video and it's worth including, then obviously I won't be. But for the most part, these are going to be videos that I make that I'm intentionally set up with these people if they're up for it. And and so if you're new here and you're watching, thank you. My name is Jesse Lynch. I run a real estate team called To the Twin Cities, and we are working on another channel and a more personal brand, more or less, that has a wider reach because the content is less specific to real estate, right? But I still think there's a really good avenue for the real estate team and myself, obviously, to benefit from it and to sort of see traction from it. And I'm going to say this every time. I really want to be clear that I don't care. This is not about getting you to join my team, this particular piece of content. It's not about getting you to join my team or joining my brokerage, which is Real Broker. I do not care what brokerage you're at, and I almost certainly don't want you on my team. I want you to be successful as an individual, and that's cool. And if anything that I can do here, any of this very honest conversation that I'm trying to have, if any of it can help with whatever you're trying to do, whether it's real estate or some other business, I that's my only goal, is that I wish I could watch people work through things, right? I wish I could be a fly on the wall as people who were, where I wanted to be, where they were working through things along the journey of how they got to where they wanted to be. So, and if you're wondering why you should pay any attention to me, first of all, you probably shouldn't, okay? Second, the real estate team, the main team To the Twin Cities, we are doing a lot of volume. At least I think it is. It would have blown my mind if 5 years ago when I started real estate, I would have known that I was doing this much volume. This year, we're around $30 million in volume so far. And we're at 60 homes sold from March 1st to what is now October 3rd. April, May, June, July, August, September, October. So that's 7 months. 60 homes sold. It's sick. And almost everything that we bring in is from video and from content. And by almost everything, I mean 99% of everything. The rare thing where somebody's family member or a friend of a friend told somebody. But I still believe that even if a friend refers you to somebody, there's a really good chance that the reason they're doing that is because of the content that you're making. Unless you're specifically networking, but that's not what we're doing. We're trying to build an audience and provide value through video. So that's why, I guess. So I'm going to start with a comment that I got from a guy named Wade, Real Wade McCore. I'm assuming you're at Real Broker. Shout out. And there's to the extent that I would encourage people to join Real, there is a very nice collaboration element to Real Broker, and it's a big brokerage. They just passed 30,000 people, and there are killers who are offering up information for free. I'm offering up information for free to the whole internet, so you could be anywhere and you could be watching this if it's helpful. So okay, Wade says, "Hey Jesse, this is great stuff, man. Thank you, by the way, because these videos, I said this last time, they are not optimized, okay? They are not intended to be high-performing YouTube videos. They're intended to be helpful to me and to other people who are either in my position or who are me 2, 3, 4 years ago. That's it. And they're not edited to be super high retention, although there's some nuance there of whether or not high retention editing is actually high retention anymore. But again, these videos are not optimized. These are intended to be deep dives and kind of sit back and just listen to me work through these things, because I know that sometimes I'm going to work through something and you're going to be like, I disagree, but that does make me think of something that I should do for my business. And that's the thing, okay? So I am silencing a group chat for one. So Real Wade McCore says, hey Jesse, this is great stuff, man. I want to ask you what actually hits me as I'm watching this. I love your channel because I'm a musician, singer, songwriter, and realtor. Shout out, all the above. And your channel has helped me to actually visualize practicing real estate without having to be the archetypal real estate agent. My biggest struggle lately is feeling like I have to separate the two identities. May seem crazy, LOL, but was interested to hear if you had a similar experience. Authenticity is a must for me. Going to work through this avatar work too. Thanks, bro. Sick. Thank you, Wade. So the interesting thing I have found about separating the two identities, as it pertains to real estate, no, I don't separate it. I lean into it, right? I think you should too. I think there's a lot more people who are like you, who are interested in music and would actually find it adds a layer of depth to you as a person who plays music. That said, if you're really loud in your, and loud I mean as a metaphor, but if you're very loud in your marketing and your promotion of your music side of things, they should probably exist as two entities, because they are two different audiences. So if you're shouting to the rooftops about, hey, come to my show, or buy my record, or buy my shirt, or something like that, that should be on a channel that is devoted to music. These are my beliefs, so that should be that. Because you have a viewer who you want to do one thing. In that case, it's go to a show, or buy at this point, listen to your song on Spotify, right? That is one audience. And then you have another audience who are people who you want to work with you as a professional, as a real estate agent. And while there should be some overlap, right? There almost certainly will be. If people know who you are, know that you exist because of music, and then find out that you're doing real estate and they go, oh, I like that guy, then there's a decent chance that they'll work with you in real estate because they've had enough experiences with you that they trust you. That said, the other way around, I don't know how much overlap there's going to be. And I don't know that you should aim for there to be overlap. I don't think whatever channel or audience you're trying to build in the real estate world, does it feel at all natural to ask them to go to your show? I would say extremely sparingly, right? I do think, so ultimately there's two different audiences and you're trying to ask them to do two different things. And they would follow you for two different things as well. Again, there will be that Venn diagram overlap where there are people who really support you in both. And on the one hand, I'm tempted to say, well, just attract those people. But it's a smaller audience, right? I have attracted a lot of people to the real estate team that we run by being open about the fact that I'm a musician and a photographer, a filmmaker. Like, I come from the art world. I have this in the background, right, of these talking head videos. There's footage of me drumming in my office in some of these videos. I'm not a good drummer, by the way. My old videos used to have me like singing in the intro. They don't anymore, but that is to give depth to the real estate audience, right? To provide some color and some character for kind of who I am as a human outside of real estate. But there's no part of me that's trying to convert those real estate clients into like fans of a band. And I think you're just barking up the wrong tree, right? Like, to me, it just strikes me as just kind of the wrong people. And there are people who will find it compelling that you are a musician, but they might not give a shit about your music. People that come to mind that we've helped are like people who are, 50, 60, who have kids who are 20, 30, who are musicians. And they like love their kids. They love that their kids are musicians. Maybe they dabble, right? Maybe they have like an appreciation for music on their own. But almost certainly it's a different genre of music than the music that I was playing. Also, the band that I was in was like a heavy band, right? We were like we used to call it like a heavy indie band. Before that, we were like a spazzy hardcore band. That's a pretty limited audience, to be honest. And I will say, the hustle of trying to get people to show up to a spazzy hardcore band show, that level of effort involved was probably the single biggest teacher in how to get people to give a shit about anything that you're doing, right? Because you're trying to get 100, 200 people to a local show when there are 10 local shows that night and 100 local shows that month. I know that math doesn't add up, but it's probably not that crazy. And you're trying to get people to show up, but there's so many options. Your band is weird. There's probably only 1,000 people in the state who would like my band, right? Like if they knew that I existed, and honestly, if that. And so that like hustle to try to get people to pay attention to you and show up for you, right? And show any level of support, that will serve you. So if nothing else, the legwork that you've done as a musician to try to grow that audience, it should help you, okay? Because you understand certain things. Even if you've ever booked a show, if you've ever organized a tryout or had, or organized 3 to 4 other people showing up to a rehearsal space, and just having done that, if you ever learned how to record audio for a effing second, or upload things to Google Drive, or upload things to YouTube, or post on social media, those are all things that some people who come into the world of real estate, they don't know how to do that. They don't know how to start a YouTube channel. And you are ahead of them because you don't have to go like, well, how the hell do you do that, right? They don't know how to, make a spreadsheet. Well, maybe you don't if you're a musician, but most musicians figured out how to do a spreadsheet if they were doing routing or something like that, if they're trying to book a tour. They're afraid to pick up the phone and make a call to somebody who doesn't know them or to somebody who reached out to them. But in music, you had to reach out to people to see if you could play a show. You had to reach out to peers to see if they wanted to join you on your show. There's this kind of, you have already, just from playing music, kind of on whatever level, if you're a touring musician or have played regional shows or have just played shows, whether it's local or whatever, you have figured out a lot of things that some people who are starting real estate, even at the age of 40, or well, maybe even worse, if they're even older, if they're 50 and they're starting real estate, and they think they're going to get into video or social media, that learning curve is enormous. But you have taken the edge off that learning curve by already doing so many of those things. So just know that like you are ahead because you've done those things. So again, we're getting back into, I'm getting a little off track. I apologize but I'm very passionate about that stuff. So the separation of church and state, if you will. So I believe that you're talking to 2 different audiences, so you should make sure that you have 2 different platforms, right? Whether it's just 2 Instagram handles, that's cool. I think it probably should be for most people. And if you're trying to get people to show up to a show on one, it doesn't make sense for this one. Likewise, if you're teaching people or if you're showing a house, it certainly maybe would appeal to some of the people who are paying attention to music, but this is really, to me, the crux. If you're paying attention to one thing, Wade, I think this is important. And obviously I don't know you, I don't know where you're at with music, I don't know your involvement with it, but there's something that sort of occurs within the ego of at least it did for me, and I'm not saying ego in a bad way either. So everybody has an ego of some sort. But your identity is wrapped up in music, okay? And I would say for myself and my music, I took it very, very seriously. In fact, it's the reason that I haven't played much music or haven't pursued it is because I don't have the time now to take it as seriously as I once did. I think there's a lot of people who are so obsessed with things. I think about like bodybuilders, for example. Not that I'm a bodybuilder, for the record. I'm going to the gym, getting strong, but the bodybuilder out there, they were so into it, right? It was their identity, it was their life, it's something they did every single day, if not multiple times a day. Maybe they took steroids, maybe they took supplements. They were just all in, and they were seeing super exciting progress on that, and even all that effort to just get a little bit more. They saw, first of all, how much effort was involved, and if for some reason they stopped doing it, or they decided, okay, I'm not going to be a bodybuilder anymore, right? Maybe they hurt themselves. That's a common, right? Or they saw, negative reactions to things that were happening with their body or something like that weren't an injury but were problems. What happens is when you stop giving something your all, 100% of your attention, it's less fun. You enter the flow state less often, and part of what I think a lot of people love about music, this is probably somewhat, slanted towards how I see music, and some people don't understand this, and that's okay, but you love the process. You love the craft, not just the craft of like making music, but you love the craft of like building the idea and branding it and making plans and planning a tour. And the only way that you can do a lot of those things is by just being all in. And so if you are a really, really serious musician, it will be really hard for you to detach from that. So again, I'm not saying you need to detach from that, right? If you are a bit more casual than that, maybe maybe you weren't touring or something like that, or maybe you still want to tour, but I think it'll be very difficult to be the main driver of a band or a musical project and also be a really busy real estate agent, because they both are very, very, very demanding of your mental capacity. And so this is what I truly think is the reason that you probably want to have the two separate brands, right, as it pertains to music. It's because if you have an overlap of, hey, I play music and I'm a real estate agent, people think you're a cool real estate agent, kind of, or they think you're a loser, which is it's possible, but screw them. But at least the people who like music, who like people who play music, will think, oh, that's a cool piece of who he is. If you are a musician and you're like, I'm also a real estate agent, that does not give you any cred, right? That doesn't give you any bonus points with anybody who likes your music. In fact, it kind of dilutes the things that you're talking about, especially if you're a successful real estate agent. And because so much of music is like, so much of it is about like the hurt, at least it was for me. It was like, it's about like the stuff that sucks in life. And obviously you can talk about good things, but if you're talking about like how financially comfortable you are, well, that's not really a song, or it's a rap song. So if you're a rapper, maybe that is sick. Come to think of it, that's probably the best genre would be rap if you were crushing it as a real estate agent. But then you're bragging about money in your rap, and that probably doesn't overlap very well with the real estate world, unless again you're very much part of that kind of that aesthetic where kind of the braggadocious, like, being rich is cool, and that's who you're attracting on the real estate side. Then okay, sure, maybe there's some overlap there. But that's where I think there's a major kind of like point of friction, is like, do you care about kind of the sanctity of the image of the brand related to music? If you do, overlapping that with real estate probably isn't the right call, because it probably dilutes that and like waters it down and is just kind of strange. That said, including bits of the part of you that plays music in the real estate, I think that helps that. So does that make sense? I think a lot of that just has to do with the fact that the identity of musicians kind of has to be that, maybe it doesn't have to be, maybe that's just how I see music, but the identity to me of musicians is that they are all in and they are obsessed with music and they are completely devoted to that one pursuit. Again, maybe not. Maybe there's people out there who are not that way, or at least they're artists, right? And it's tough, I think, to know, to be sort of business forward in the art world. You almost have to be an artist, a successful artist, you almost have to be really good at the art. Well, you have to be really good at the art, but you almost have to be unbelievably good at making the business part completely invisible. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Thanks for that question, Wade. You got me talking for quite a while. A couple last thoughts. You said authenticity is a must for you. I agree. And in the music world, authenticity is also a must, and which is why it can be difficult to exist in both worlds. But it depends, again, on where you're at with music. If you just really love to play music and you're not like pursuing it as a career, then it's probably just fine. If you're just like trying to get 100 people to a bar, like a local bar, then yeah, that's all good. They can know that you're a realtor and be like, that realtor, he's actually really good at music, And I'm sure in the history of mankind and the future of mankind, I'm sure there will be a famous musician who was a realtor, and who was like doing well as a realtor, and like they just took off. But you are much more likely to hear the story of the factory worker who was just slogging, right? They just were like in the shit, and then their music took off, and they just kept doing it, and then their music took off. That's a much more romantic story than like, yeah, he got really comfortable financially, but he was good at music, So what are you going to do? And I still, for the record, I still intend to make music. I still intend to make projects where I allow myself to go all in for some period of time. And because that's how I think about it. And that's kind of what I need out of music. I need complete focus and complete dedication, and I need to enter the flow state and just like really lose myself in that process. And if I'm just doing it one Monday a week, that ain't gonna do it for me. That's gonna feel like a waste of time. And that's just how I see it. Last thought on this. If you're not a musician and you're watching this, bless your heart, appreciate it. And if you are, what's up? You're the ones, you have this leg up that you don't even necessarily realize you have. Honestly, I forget what that thought was, but I did think of another parallel. So in working through this new brand that I've been working on, if you watched episode 3, you saw me work through some of this brand. I've talked about this on I think a more recent episode, which probably isn't out yet. Well, if you're watching this, it is out. It's not out now as I'm recording this. But I was really debating if this new brand, if this new aspect of the brand should just be on the main channel, should just be on the To the Twin Cities channel. And the reason that I decided against that, it's really, really similar to the music and real estate thing, which again, real estate clients might think it's cool that you're involved in music, but your music fans, supporters, probably don't find it particularly interesting or compelling that you are doing real estate, unless you found a really artistic way to do real estate, which would be interesting. I mean, it's what I try to do every day. It's literally, I'm just working toward like turning just pure pieces of art into real estate branding, and it's hard, but that's what this whole new channel is. So I could see if you were like renovating homes and making like really beautiful homes, that would show that side of you, this like creative side, where you're like, not only am I good at music, but I'm really good at making a house beautiful. I think there's art to that, right? And there's some level of parallel. But like, hey, I help people buy and sell homes. I don't know. My opinion is that the music fan won't really find that interesting. So the reason that is a parallel with this new brand thing is because I realized that the To the Twin Cities fan, viewer, that audience, and actually, let me do it this way. The To the Twin Cities, so my hands are the same. The To the Twin Cities viewer or supporter or client, they will probably think some of the videos that I'm making on this new channel, which Making Minnesota, something like that, there will be a pretty good overlap with that because they're trying to learn about Minnesota. And so the Make Minnesota thing, saying like, look, here are all these cool people doing this cool stuff. I think, again, there's that overlap, and there's something to be gleaned from that. Again, not total overlap, because, you know, a first-time home buyer who's relocating here, who like does not even have a taste for the finer things at all, they might not find like salvage denim or custom cabinetry at all interesting. And hey, God bless them. You know, that's fine. That's their prerogative. But there probably will be a decent overlap where the Twin Cities people, clients, viewers find Make Minnesota interesting. That said, Make Minnesota is intended to be helpful and useful and entertaining for people who already live in Minnesota as well. So you have the overlap of To the Twin Cities, and you have the already existing people over here the already existing Minnesota residents who just find it interesting to like learn more about the people who are doing really cool stuff in Minnesota. But those folks, the people who just find Make Minnesota on their own, there's likely to be a whole heap of videos on To the Twin Cities that they do not find interesting at all. So, for example, there are probably neighborhood tours, right? Or best places to buy a new build is a video we put out not that long ago. For all I know, and I hope the average viewer of Make Minnesota is, or really the target audience, they probably already own a very nice home, statistically. And so they're not looking at where can I buy a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 new build home. They probably own a bigger and cooler home than that. So there's kind of this like mid-level neighborhood tour stuff and like more affordable chunk of the Twin Cities that we're talking a lot about on To the Twin Cities that the viewer of Make Minnesota does not care about. Of course, at least the avatar doesn't. I'm sure, again, there will be some overlap, but that's kind of how I see where one kind of bolsters the other. Make Minnesota kind of bolsters To the Twin Cities, but To the Twin Cities kind of dilutes or waters down Make Minnesota. Make Minnesota is aiming to be a luxury heritage brand with like this bespoke feel, right? That feels timeless and not effortless, quite the opposite. High effort and high intent. And To the Twin Cities is very casual. It is not intended to feel super, super high end and luxury or anything like that. So to me, that's a similar thing. You have two audiences. One might appreciate the other, but the other won't appreciate the one. That didn't make much sense, but my hands helped. For sure my hands helped. Okay, thanks Wade. So now, we're pretty far in, but now I want to work through or talk through the questions that I asked during this interview with Rebecca. So Rebecca Remick, she is the owner of City Homes. City Homes makes beautiful houses, and they're so cool. The first video we ever did for a City Homes house, I was like, I want them to build me a house someday. That's like a goal, a somewhat pie in the sky goal at the moment, but it's a goal. And they just make such lovely houses that are so unbelievably solid. The architects they work with are so savvy and just make such nice spaces. And they're not enormous either. That's one of my favorite things. It's big, don't get me wrong. It's not a small house, but it's not big for the sake of big. And she answered some of these questions and kind of mentioned that a little bit. But so I'll work through these questions that I asked her, and yeah, we'll just I'll kind of give some commentary. So I kind of broke it down into 4 main sections of the video, and the first one is kind of with the goal of like setting the scene, and without having to set the scene myself, if that makes sense. So I was shooting a bunch of stuff throughout the day, and before the interview aspect of it started, basically, and I think this is how I'm going to go about it, but I'm going to start by saying like, now I'm going to have a conversation with my friend Rebecca Remick at City Homes. And I asked Rebecca, I said, is that okay? Is it okay if I say my friend Rebecca at City Homes? And she said, yeah. So, and I do feel like we've worked together enough that that can make sense. But it's just, honestly, it's a tone that I want to set in every video, because I think it's a cool way to introduce somebody to another business or a creator or whatever, right? And it's a nice way for the channel to have kind of a through line. Is that I want it to generally feel like I am the friend of the viewer and I am introducing them to another friend. That makes sense? So first question in kind of setting the scene of where we are is tell me where we are and tell me about the vision behind the space and what makes it special to you. So the main goal was for her to be able to say, like, we're at the newest build from City Homes, and this has been a project for a client, and blah blah blah, and give a little bit of backstory. I think that's a question that I'm trying to figure out a new way of saying. One of the things I'm trying to spark a bit of excitement out of all of these questions. Easier said than done, for the record. I want for people to, whoever I'm interviewing, I want them to go, God, ooh, and just get excited with every single question. And right now I'm new. I'm new to interviewing. I don't have a journalism degree or anything like that, and I don't know how to ask good questions. In fact, that's a thing in real life. Some people are just so good at shooting the shit and just asking 1,000 questions. I clam up. I am not very good at that. My mom is actually shockingly good at that. She never, ever, ever runs out of questions for people. And maybe that's why I don't, because she just did ask questions. But yeah, crazy. It's something that in general I'm trying to get better at, just in life, right? And obviously even more so in these videos. So then the follow-up from that is, are there any particular design elements that you're especially proud of? She actually talked a lot about the lot and how challenging of a lot that house had, and how much they did to make that lot suitable for this client. And it was really fascinating. The backyard, for example, they dug down 15 or 20 feet and added retaining walls in the back so that they could have a flat backyard. And because they wanted a flat backyard. So there's also, there's quite a few things. They also had to dig the house down and kind of have that start a little bit shorter so that the house didn't look too enormous next to other houses. And it wasn't that much bigger, but the house was kind of on a hill, so all of the other houses were like a little bit shorter than it naturally. So by having the house on the hill, they dug it down so it started a little bit lower from the street than the other houses next to it. Fascinating. And the amount of work that goes into that is crazy, and it's beyond a scope that I even really understand. I've renovated homes. I have a pretty good idea of how a home goes together and how to work on so many things in a house. But those kind of things, those planning stage things, holy crap, I barely have a clue. It's crazy compared to how in-depth these people could get. So are there any design elements that you're especially proud of? I do think there's a way of asking that question to any one of these makers that like where they all can go, ooh yeah, check this out. And I imagine it will change depending on what the person does, and so I have to kind of be able to adapt these, which is a thing that I'm working on for these questions. And maybe I'll do this on another episode, but I'm trying to work on how to make these questions, how to boil them down to the very, very core of the question. And then how do I expand that core, the soul of that question, to ask anybody that question? And so the design elements that you're especially proud of, like the soul of that is like what excited you about this, right? Like what, when you look at the thing you make or made, what do you look at and go, yeah, that thing's sick, and like maybe there's a little bit of like people have no idea. And actually I'm gonna write that down. What can't people see is crazy about what you do. Okay, right? Like hey, anybody who's watching this, we don't know what really goes into this. So show us the crazy, show us the difficulty. And I think that's a nice core, kind of understanding of what this question is. Show us the difficulty, right? Like, explain to me why I can't just go do this. And I think if they really go, well, you could, but this is the thing that's really hard and that took decades to learn. I think that's really interesting. So then, how does this home connect to the local environment? That, I would say, that's very specific to the home. So maybe the core of that question is like, if I'm thinking about like a chef, it's like, okay, how does this restaurant like fit into this neighborhood? What does it mean to this neighborhood? But is that interesting? I'm not sure. Maybe it's interesting. Is it a question that will excite the chef? I don't think so. The space of an artist. I don't know that maybe there's something to be said for that, but I find it hard to boil that question down to what's the exciting, passion, sort of igniting core of that question. I'm not sure there is one. Maybe it's something about like the people that it serves. So core, what does this place or product or whatever mean to the people who use it? Maybe, okay, something like that. So it's fun to talk through this because I thought through these questions and I thought those seem like good questions. I never asked anybody that until I was talking to Rebecca. And so then kind of the next section, I kind of have it titled Digging into Passion and Craft. So the main question is, what does craftsmanship mean to you and why is it so important? So again, I want that to be a through line of the whole channel. I want craftsmanship and attention to detail to be a through line for the whole channel. So I really thought Rebecca's response was interesting. And some of it is because she is not the craftsman herself. She has talent to pull this all off, but she is more working with the craftsman and keeping an eye on the craftsman and making sure that she's only hiring the best craftsmen. But I think that's actually, I thought that it was really interesting to hear from her. Her idea. She said that good craftsmanship is important whether or not you have nice materials. So, or luxury materials. So she said you can have handmade wooden door, okay, or you can have a hollow core door from Home Depot. She didn't say these exact words. I'm paraphrasing. And she said the craftsmanship is the installation of that item to make sure, or the construction of the item to make sure that it is square and it is plumb and it operates correctly. And I thought that was, again, a very compelling take. And I kind of wish I had followed up with maybe a question about like where does the craftsmanship of the item, so the hollow core door versus the handmade, like what's the difference then? Because to me, the handmade wooden door, solid wood door with detail, that is huge, right? And there's something to that, the tactile feel of those things being so robust. But yeah, I think nonetheless though, what I liked about that was that it got an interesting response, a response I didn't expect. So I do like that question, generally speaking. Are there favorite techniques or materials you love to use? With her, I don't even remember what she said, but I can imagine that being helpful to, or a good question for other people. And so let me core cues. I'm trying to, again, take notes on this, so thanks for hanging out. Core cues, sort of what, like getting to the root of like what materials, because a lot of her, she's working with buyers, right? She's working with the end homeowner, and so for her, it's whatever materials I need to achieve the goal of the client. Again, I think that question arrives at an interesting answer, but it's interesting because it's not the answer that it's nothing like the answer that I thought I would get. So I really thought for her, I thought she'd be talking about certain types of tiles, oak, white oak. Yes, interesting. And it was none of that. But it was still a good answer, and maybe a better answer than I would have guessed. So, and then I said, how do you stay inspired in your work? And her answer was a lot about, because I'm helping great people, achieve a home that they've always dreamed of, or whatever. And I'm trying to imagine some other questions. Maybe another question could be like, where do you find inspiration outside of this, the products you make and the clients you serve? Okay, so I'm not sure. To me, I would probably be saying like, movies and storytellers and things like that. They're big influences on how I see the world and why I want to make things, and music and the storytellers and music and things. But yeah, the cores of those are maybe a little bit hard to get to. I mean, like, why are you so good? That's almost like the core. Why are you so good? And do you have, like, do you actually have, almost like a superpower of sorts when it comes to detail? Okay, something like that. Then the next question was personal stories, or the next section was personal stories and highlights. So the origin question is, are there any early experiences that shaped your approach to quality? So I actually think just like, how did you get started is in this. I think that's just a better question, to be honest. And then a good follow-up was like, are there any early experiences that shaped your approach to quality? And maybe there's a better way of saying that. I asked, one of the questions I followed up with that was kind of on the fly was, are there any moments in your career that you can specifically recall having to make a giant leap in your skills and your quality of work? Okay, 1 second. Okay, buddy. And so, okay, are there early experiences that shape your approach to quality? And then kind of, are there any moments in your career that you can specifically recall having to make a giant leap in your skills and your quality of work? And like, was there ever a moment that put the pressure on you and you just had to like show up and do it, right? You just had to just get better and level up. I can think of a lot of things where that's happened to me. And you like wake up the next day musically. Actually, it's really apparent when it happens in music, especially at guitar or singing or any instrument. Sometimes there's this thing, you're just working on it for weeks, and you wake up one day and you just go, I got better. Like, it's like overnight I got better, and it's because you were pushing so hard for so long, and eventually your brain just went like, they're trying to do that. Okay. I have to admit, I just thought there for a second that my audio wasn't working, and I was like, man, I've been talking for a long time. So, it wouldn't be the first time. So, next question, it's sort of like a stories, kind of prompting to get stories, although I will say the memorable or moments in your career that made you step up, that's kind of a bit of a story. So I'm gonna kind of put that underneath there. Can you share a memorable project that stands out as a highlight? And maybe that's more of like a sub question to the other one if they're kind of struggling to answer that. So can you share a memorable project that stands out as a highlight? Was there a challenge you faced that turned into a great story? I just had a thought of a decent question, I think, would be, when you look back on all of this, what will be the glory years? Maybe I'll say, what will be the good old days? What do you think will be the good old days? Okay. And maybe some people won't want to answer that. Maybe some people won't want to feel super like there are the good old days. But then there's so when did you first realize you wanted to do this? Okay. What's the moment that hooked you? That's a similar question. Who or what inspired you to take this path? Also a similar question. And what did the early days look like? So yeah, I think that's, maybe I could even ask like, what's the earliest memory you have that you can clearly see led to this, right? Like, what can you see that led you down this path? For mine in real estate, it's interesting. It's a couple. I can remember going to open houses with my mom when I was really little. We would go to like, not crazy houses, but nice houses that we couldn't afford. And that comes to mind. My mom always wanted to be a real estate agent, but she couldn't. At some point, she was a single mom by the time she really maybe would have. And then there's I can remember watching like Flip This House or Flip That House on A&E back in the day and thinking like, I bet I could do that. I had never done any kind of construction. I just thought like, I bet I could. So yeah, interesting. I kind of like that. I kind of like that question. And now I'm kind of thinking, what questions would I like to be asked? Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. What would kind of like make me light up a little bit, I do think when you look back on all this in X years, what will be the good old days is a good one. And then there's future vision and dream projects is kind of the next pillar. This is again to try to get them thinking in the future and get them excited about what's next and talk about like what they're really passionate about right now, what they're pushing for right now. The main question is, if you could design your dream project with no limitations, what would it be? I actually don't remember Rebecca did have a question, or did have an answer, and it was a lot about density, because she's pushing to add some density and she's getting a lot of pushback on it. And I think what she wants to do is a good idea, and I think it's silly to think that it won't be a good idea overall, but the way she'll do it is very nice. So follow-ups to that. What's a wild idea you'd love to see happen? And is there, it's a tricky question. And I think even she was like, what do you mean? And I specifically was saying like, is there anything in the world that you wish somebody would get done that you don't have time for, but you think is a really good idea? Is there any idea in the world that you really wish somebody would do because you think it's a great idea, but you don't have time? Okay, I don't remember what her answer was, but I think that's kind of a fun concept. And then, is there a role or person that would be a game changer for you and your business? That's basically like trying to give them an opportunity to say like, I'm looking for this kind of person to come into my business and help me. And the goal for me is for there to be people watching the channel who go, I might have somebody for that, right? Or they might go, wow, that I could do that. And yeah, she had somebody. Naturally, I think in a business owner kind of way, she was like, it's like another version of me, basically. It's hard not to think that way, because you wish you could focus on other things, but you got to focus on the stuff that you're doing. So then the last question, this is the one that really like got her to like light up, I thought, is if your 10-year-old self walked in here today, what would they say? For her, it was actually her 30-year-old self, because that's when she started building homes, was when she was 30. So if they walked in here and saw what you were doing and saw the level of craftsmanship, saw, for her, this house, what would she say? And she really lit up. And I think, her answer wasn't that extensive, but she was like, I think she'd be pretty impressed, that we got to here. And just the fact that she lit up so much makes me think like, okay, what are the questions that I can ask that will make people light up? And yeah, that's the hard part, but it's also the really enticing part that I think will allow this channel to have a bit of momentum. It will make people kind of like want to do it. If you think about like Hot Ones, part of the reason Hot Ones is so good is, for one, it's a very funny, packaging to have, answering questions while you're losing your mind from hot sauce. But he has really good questions. And if you've ever watched it, you probably know that. If you haven't, watch a couple episodes and you'll see that he's asking questions, and like the people are often like, what? Like, how do you know that about me? Or like, how is it possible you're asking me this question? So, and not because they're rude or anything, they're just really interesting questions. So then the last question that maybe I won't ask on air, maybe I should give people the opportunity to answer it on air if they want to. It's basically a networking question. It's for me. Is there anyone else in Minnesota you know who's doing something exceptional that you think I should talk to? So business owners, craftspeople, artists, creatives, makers, chefs, restaurateurs, somebody who runs an amazing high-end event, etc. And the goal for me with that is like, can you introduce me to somebody who you think might want to talk on, might want to be featured in something like this? So I think the on-air part is maybe, on air, like it's live. I think maybe the reason it's challenging is because maybe they have a few people in mind, but they don't want to give favoritism or anything like that. So I don't care if it's on air. I just want people I want more opportunities, I want more shots on goal. So honestly, I think, and I think in the last episode I was working through names. I'm pretty confident it's going to be just called, I think the channel is just going to be my name, to be honest. It's funny, I've done that so many times. But those channels, this one is called Jesse Lynch & Co. Maybe it could be that, to be honest. But it's not going to be on this channel. It's going to be on a different channel because I want to keep making this series and this type of content. And so y'all are the wrong audience, So, I think it'll just be called my name. And I think I will have series within the channel. So I think Make Minnesota or Making Minnesota will be the name of the series where I'm talking to people. I also have kind of the idea of, and I don't know if these are good titles or not, or if it just should be kind of, the title screen in the video. But like one idea I had was the hands that make Minnesota. I think that's interesting, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Certain crafts and I don't know. A good example was Rebecca, where she wasn't really, she's not doing the physical labor. She's like the mind behind it. So maybe that could still work. But and with that, then Make Minnesota is kind of the subtext, right? Is like the blank that make Minnesota. So the rides that make Minnesota, that would be like kind of the motorcycle, like kind of taking this like chill approach, kind of like lean back and just like enjoy this ride with me, because to me it's part of what makes Minnesota. Maybe the road trips that make Minnesota, and maybe that would just be able to be a bucket that fits all sorts of different things. I think on the next episode I'll probably work through a little bit more of that and what might be some of those interesting topics and ways of featuring these different things. And I think there'll be, again, a little bit of overlap with the Twin Cities, but with the goal of having it be like really beautiful, and the pacing will be slower. And actually last thing, and then I'm going to wrap up. Last night I was sitting on the porch with Oscar, smoking a cigar, by the way, which I just started doing. I haven't smoked a cigar, maybe one in my life, and probably only a few seconds of it. But I randomly was like, that sounds nice. I have this backyard that I just love to hang out in, and Chris, my fiance, almost always goes to bed before me, and so I was like, it'd be cool to not just like watch TV, through the rest of the night, and like kind of have a reason to go chill out there. So I've been, every other night or so, I go out and I sit on the deck with Oscar. He loves it out there on a nice weather day, and then I just smoke a cigar and I think about stuff, or I work on stuff or whatever. But I was working on going through Epidemic Sound, which is the platform that I use for music for all of the different channels that I have. It's like license free or whatever, copyright free or whatever, licensed songs that you can use. And I was going into a few different genres and trying to pull out songs that like I thought were kind of like what I want the channel to feel like. And I made this big, huge playlist, ultimately gave it to my editor to kind of like, hey, you got to use these, and you got to pace it to these, and that's going to be kind of the backbone. A lot of it was like post-rock and like very, dramatic or very calm and simple, but then sometimes very explosive. So anyway, last thought on that. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.